Beginning on Daf Mesech Yevamos Daf Ayin Vav. We begin 2 lines down at the top of the Yomit. The Gemara continues with the Besul of Nikiv, which is one of the elements in this halacha of Krei Shavcha, of when there's a puncture and Petzuadaka. The Gemara continues on that theme. Some of this we're going to discuss in today's Daf are, like we said, Petzuadaka, Krei Shavcha, where it says in the Torah, Yom Petzuadaka, Krei Shavcha, B'Kal Hashem. We discussed regarding the Nesinim. They're actually one of the 7 nations that were in Eretz Canaan, which were supposed to be wiped out, but they tricked the Jewish people and to make them believe that they're not, and subsequently they made a gzera that they shouldn't be married to the Jewish people. That non-Jews, there's no marriage with them. Amayni and my avi, which we darshan amayni amaynis my avi my avis, where it says lo yavi amanim ab b'kal Hashem gam darasir lo yavi b'kal Hashem, that only considers the men, not the women. Mitzvah about Doimi, the Torah says do shlishi yavi b'kal Hashem. As a machlek is regarding the women of mitzvah Doimi, if they're permitted right away, or if they also have to wait until after 3 generations. So, said in the Mishnah, this halacha of Petzuadak and Krei Shavcha. And the Gemara just finishes off one element of it. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Mishmal, second line down with the top of the Yomit. It says, Nikav, if there was a small hole, Venistam. Now, it got plugged up, and it's not recognizable. So we see, if it's that big, that kol shilu nikri v'nikra, that if you would have keri, and the semen would come out, and it would widen the hole because of the pushing of the seed that's coming out that gathers, and it would tear, then puzzle, it's invalid. He's a puzzle. If he lav, if it wouldn't, then kosher is going to be kosher. So Rabbi asked, Heicha, wait, where exactly is this hole? If it's beyond the atara, away from the body, even all cut off would be okay. No, Ella ba'atara atzma. We're talking about in the atara, which is that raised border itself, because in the top of the gid, which is above the atara, Rashi explains you can't say it's talking over there, because there most definitely that it's not going to tear, because the seed does not push and gather really over there. It only starts really pushing forcefully by the hole where it comes out. So the Gemara is not entertaining to say that it's going to come out the carry and it's going to tear is going to be on the upper part of the male organ. It must be in the lower part, but it can't be beyond the atar, because there, even if the whole thing was cut off, it wouldn't be a problem. So we're saying in the atar itself was this halacha that we said that if it would tear, it'd be possible, if not, it'd be kash. We learned Amar Amari, Bamar, Amar Ma'ukva, Amar Shmuel. It says Nika b'atara atzma. If there's a hole, puncture in the atar itself, then this time gets plugged up. Kol shilu nikra b'nikra. But if it would get carry and it would tear, it would be puzzle. If you love a kasha, then he's kasha. Let our teacher teach us. What should we do? In other words, if such a situation comes in front of us, how can we bring the person to seminate to see if it's going to tear, to check him out, to know, could he get married? This guy has a medical condition. He's coming to the Rav, says, this is a regular Jewish girl. Can I get married or not? So he has this injury closed up. He says, okay. If you have keri, it's going to tear. You puzzle. If not, no. How do you check? Somebody says, okay, look, I'll tell you. What you do is you bring hot barley bread. And you put it by the orifice of where a person excretes from, by his anus. Now, because of the heat, what's going to happen is umikri. It's going to cause him to have keri. And then you see, watch what happens. Abaya says, so what do you mean? You think everyone in the world's Yaakov Avinu? It says by him, he said that Reuben was koichi, v'reishis oini, was my vigor and the first of my strength, meaning, that was the first droplet of keri that ever came out of him. He never saw keri in his life. In other words, you need to come onto such a production to have a person have keri? What do you think? There's no other way of a person? People have. It's important. Bachram should hear this. People should know this. People have keri. There are things that happen. But not all Yaakovinu. Elamabai, rather, Bai says you don't have to go and put hot barley bread by his anus. Mabrinan, kamei big ditzavayin, very simply. People are warm-blooded people. You pass in front of him the colored garments of a woman. He's going to think about the woman, and he's going to have keri. You don't have to go ahead and take hot barley bread. Now, Rabbi says the opposite. He says, "What you think everyone is so immorally steeped like Barzilai Hagiladi.
So this is mutter based on because it's for a purpose.
Yeah. I mean, well, you're not really doing anything. We didn't say you could do an action.
Well, you're doing an action by passing having hirur or whatever.
Right. Yeah. So Shad is what type of what's the hirurim? Yeah. What's the what? It didn't say who is. Yeah. What the article says.
Only the clothing and not the isha herself.
And that's not a problem?
Yeah.
It's not a problem. Okay. So Barzil Hagilodi was very steeped in immorality. It says in the pasuk, he says, "Im yitam avadecha." You think I could taste anymore? Right, but I'm saying usually that's supposed to look a big ditzavayin either. In halacha, you're not supposed to look a big ditzavayin. I guess for this situation, they did allow that. Now the Gemara says in Shabbos, what? For what purpose? The Gemara says in Shabbos that from the days of Aleph, he was steeped in immorality, and that's why actually he got old, because the maidservant of the household of the Rebbe was 92 years old, and she was able to taste what was in the pot. And he's like, "You think I have taste anymore?" Because he got so old, because it saps his vigor when you're so steeped in immorality. So he's trying to say, what do you think? Everyone sees Kerry from seeing a woman's colored garments. So he's saying the opposite. I mean, everyone's like Yaakov, and I think everyone's like Barzil Hagiladi. The Rabbi says, "You're right. Machvarta, it's clear because the Shemir colleague explained before. No, you don't pass the colored garments. Not everyone's going to see Kerry seeing a woman's colored garments, and rather you put the hot barley bread by the person's rear." Talking about in the brisa, Nikev, if someone has a hole in the male organ, possibly is invalid, like Krei Shavcha, but Meshur Shais is because what happens is because it drips, because from the heat of the lust, so it comes out through the hole. Now, when the semen comes out through the hole, meaning through this nikev, not the regular hole, so then it's not going to shoot forth like an arrow. And the Gemara tells Chagigit of Tetzvam and Alf that any semen does not shoot forth like an arrow, won't be mazrir, won't create a child. So here, when you have a hole, it's going to make you possible because it's going to drip out of that hole. It's not going to shoot forth out of the hole. Now, nistin, if let's say the hole gets closed up, of course it's going to be kosher, because now he could create a child. And this is a psul of a hole which could go back to being valid if it gets clogged up. It says when you say this, what's that excluding? We're excluding if you have a membrane that forms because of a wound that was healed, the enekrum. So that's not considered as a membrane, because that's going to open up again. And that's like what we call the sirchas. We have on the lungs, we have sirchas, which is these scratches, which actually makes the animal treif, because although, it's chayzlach sherei, no, that's not chayzlach sherei, because that's going to end up opening up. That's what we're coming to exclude from this halacha of the male organ to that of the law of tarfus. Now, Shalach later of Ida bar Oven Labai, he said, "Hey Chavdinan, what do we do if we have such a person who has a hole in his male organ? If we want to heal him, to close it up, because we said if it's chayzlach sherei, if it gets closed up, how do we heal such a person?" Says Gemara, what you do is like this. Maisinan sa'arta. You bring a barley corn, and you scratch all around the hole so that it should get mucousy and blood should come out, and therefore it's actually going to heal, and it's actually going to create the healing flesh, the connective tissue. And umaisina tarba, what you do is you bring fats, you smear it on the wound, umaisina shumshumana gamala, and you bring a large ant, and you place the head of the ant over there, and it starts biting, and its head is going to get stuck in the hole, and then the paskina leilereshe, you cut off its head, that it should close up the hole. And as long as it continues to deteriorate, the flesh will go and connect and take that place and heal over that hole. So that will actually close up the hole. Now, but this has to be specifically a barley corn that you scrape with, because of a parzla, but with steel, actually mizrib zarv, which either means it's going to make a wound, or another interpretation Rashi says it's actually going to swell. Now, and this is also talking about only when you're making a cut in a small hole. Of a gadol, but a large one, mikpuli mikpel, that actually, after it heals, it's going to end up peeling off, and the whole thing is going to get undone. Now, Rabbi says, if someone urinates from two places, meaning the inverse of what we said in the previous stuff. That guy, his semen was coming through the urinary tract. Here, his urine is coming through the seminal tract. So possibly he's going to be invalid. Amar Rabba says, less hilchasa lekabra leka'aba. The halacha is not like the son and not like the father. Meaning, bra, the son, Rabba, the son of Rav Huna, the halacha is not like him. Regarding Hoda Amar, this that he just said, it's not true. Even if the urine comes through the seminal tract, it's going to be kosher. And Abba, it's not like the father for a different halacha. Then Rav Huna says, Noshim ha-mesayl lezu bezu. Women who engage in lesbian type of activities, which they actually are intimate, like the way a male and a female is, that they rub their genital areas one with the other, they're pasulas lekuhuna. They're pasal for kuhuna. Now, why are they pasal for kuhuna? Rashi says because of znus, because of it's like an act of immorality. The Rivan, interestingly, Tosfos brings, says that actually because they're taking the semen that they had from their husbands and they're destroying it with the other woman. Which Tosfos says it's not possible to say like that, because we have a different Gemara with the daughters of Shmuel, that he had a problem with them being Messiahs and they were single then. So it's obviously not because of destroying the semen, rather it's because of this halacha of Zaina. It's a type of iznus, which is an important halacha because of it's very different, obviously, than homosexuality, which the Torah points out is chiyuv misa. Here, when women do it, it's not necessarily integral that there's something wrong, but that's what Rav Huna says. He says they're pasuk v'kuna. That says the Gemara. The halacha is not like Rav Huna. When he says a single boy and a single girl are having intimacy, not for marital purposes, and he makes her into his zainam, that's a man with a woman. A woman with a woman, it's just licentiousness, it's just preaches, it's just breaching the fence, because no bia. And halachically, really, it's much lenient, the halacha of two women, than anything else, because you're really not doing anything. The halacha is not like the father in this halacha of Nashim HaMasel Zubazu, that as if she's pasukuna, it does not make her pasukuna. I'll continue halacha the next Mishnah. I'll continue on the theme of Petzua Daka, Krei Shavcha. It says in the Mishnah, Petzua Daka, someone with crushed testicles, the Krei Shavcha, which really, it's not really testicles, it's really all of them, like we said, all three. So let's discuss why do we pick one Daka and why one the Shavcha. But be there as it may, they're all for all. A Krei Shavcha, Mutarin B'Giyeris M'Shachreres. They're permitted to marry a woman who converted or a woman who was freed from being a slave woman because they're not called kahal, because they're only forbidden to marry into the kehillah. Somebody does the pasuk in Nevarim. And the gears and the shefcha are not part of the kehillah, it's no problem. Now, relating back to halacha the Mishnah, the Gemara brings they asked the following question from Rav Sheshis. Petzua daka kohen. That is, a kohen that's kosher is forbidden to marry a Giris Meshachras because they're considered Zaina because of the bia that they had before. So if you have a Petzua Daka that's a Kohen, which again really a Petzua Daka only once he could marry is a Giris Meshachras, and a Kohen cannot marry. So the question, but if he's a Petzua Daka that's a Kohen, Ma Giris Meshachras, what's the halacha? Could he marry a Giris Meshachras? Meaning, because he's forbidden the Israelis. Could he marry Gears? So the Gemara explains the question. On the one hand, do you say B'Kedushas Koi Ba'aser? He retains the sanctity as a Kohen, and therefore he's forbidden to marry Gears B'Shachres. Maybe no. La B'Kedushas Koi B'Shari. No, maybe he loses his sanctity by being B'Tzu Daka, like he's not able to marry B'Kal. He loses his sanctity.
What nullifies the law
of marrying
of a Kohen marrying
the Zaina? Why would it not be? Why would it take away the Issa of the Zaina? It sounds like he's saying because he doesn't have. It's like a chalal. Like in other words, when he he doesn't have his sanctity. So all these are the reason why we have in Parashat Kedeshim all the Isuri Kohen is because Emor. All these is because
Slechem Hashem.
What?
A Petzua Daka can't do that, right?
No, he's a mim.
Right, I mean, right. Is that the point? Right. But that would be at least a kedusha regarding like Rambam's Hilchas Yisur Bia isn't safe for kedusha. It's in kedusha. It's considered a kedusha thing.
He's not makar of the Lechem Hashem.
Well, I don't know if that's the point. The point is like Yisur Bia, the prohibited Bia's relationships are in safer kedusha. I mean, do you say that he can't be Bakal Hashem? So we say he loses his kedusha. So he's like an Arakayin.
He's allowed to be Matana. So he's allowed to be Matana. So he doesn't have the kedusha anymore.
Or he's like Bimatame.
He's a kohen.
Meaning
If he's a khushav.
then what? Then he can be Matame to what?
To
To mace? And he doesn't have the
He doesn't have
halacha.
the kedusha.
That's the shaila.
Well, I'm saying according to that.
Oh, if it would be that
if
far.
it's not the kedusha say could, then
Right.
then it's all gone.
Right. So yeah, so that's the something. It's not like if he would lose kedusha, then he wouldn't be like in the Isuri kedusha, which is that of a Zaina. Some of the Rav Shesha says in Isur, we learned this in the Brisa that he's actually permitted. P'tzur Daka Yisrael. P'tzur Daka that's a regular Yisrael, Mutab ben Nesina. He's permitted to marry one of the Nesinim, which is, they're actually from the Shiba Umais that were in Eretz Canaan, from the Gevinim, who they fooled the Jewish people, and they made believe and they took him as converts. Now, Visok, if you think to say P'tzur Daka is B'Kedushasikoy, he retains his original sanctity, meaning the sanctity of a Kohen, and the sanctity of a regular Jew. How could Yisrael marry one of the Nesinim? But Ikri Khan, you have the person from the Leitis Chatenbam, you're not allowed to marry them. Oh, so you see, obviously he doesn't have the Isra of Leitis Chatenbam because as a P'tzur Daka, he loses Kedusha of Yisrael. So okay, P'tzur Daka Kohen also loses his Kedusha of a Kohen, and does not have the Isra of Bia of a Kohen, of a Zaina. So Rabbi says, no, it's not a riot. Ata Hasam, you think over there that when the Torah says you're not allowed to marry Oivdi Kechavim, is Mishum Kedusha V'lav Kedushu, it's because of sanctity or not sanctity, that you're telling me that it should be forbidden even if they're Megayer, for example, the Nesinim who are Gerim. No. Over there the reason is because Dilma Moiled Ben. It's very simple, he might have a child, a son. Also Palach Lavitz Kechavim, he's going to go worship Avodah Zarah. So therefore the pasuk is it's only prohibiting when they're non-Jewish. But Ki Megairi, and the Ger says Mi Yisrael Sharu. So when they convert from a Jew, it's actually permitted because this that the Rabbanan said that a kosher Yisrael should not marry in the Sina, but Rabbanan who the Gazabu. That's considered Rabbanan. Like the Gemara says later on the Parak of Ein Chesed Beis, David was Geyser on them. But when were the Rabbanan Geyser? It's by men who could have children. That's similar to the Issa Raisa when they're didn't convert yet, that the problem is because you might have a child from them and then they're going to go worship Avodah Zarah. But the P'tzur Daka can not have a child because of Rabban. But when that Geyser said yes, that's why Yisrael can marry from the Nesinim after they converted, which Nesinim are those from the Sheba Umas who converted, and therefore you cannot say anything regarding our question of the Kohen who is a P'tzur Daka regarding his kedusha because that halacha has not to do with kedusha or not kedusha. It's regarding just if you can have a child who's going to go worship Avodah Zarah, and even though they converted, they were Geyser up to before they converted. So the Gemara says, but if that's the case, on this answer that Rabbi just gave, the Gemara asks. So Mamzer, the Bar Eludi. A Mamzer is someone who can have a child. And he's prohibited regarding all Yisurin in the Torah. And biblically, he's forbidden in a non-Jew. So Chanami the Aser, are you going to tell me that rabbinically he's forbidden to marry from the Nesinim because he could have a child? Because that's what you told me the criterion is? But if it's not, within the Mishnah Masechet Kedushin, it doesn't say like that. It says Mamzer and Nesinim, Mutam Lav Zebezeh. Why? Mamzer could have a child, until whoever could have a child is forbidden to marry even when the Megayer, which what Nesinim were, because of Atu Lefnei, which obviously Mamzer cannot do the Issa Deraisa of marrying a Gentile. So rather, the Gemara says a similar answer, just a different version that will answer this question. Kigaz Rabban, when the Rabban Geyser was Beksherim, by those who are kosher. Bipsulim, for example, now this word Psulim includes P'tzur Daka and Mamzer, like Rabban were not Geyser, because first of all, it's what's called Mishal L'Shchich. It's not common to be a Mamzer or P'tzur Daka. Or you could say that this Gezer was only because of the Isser. Meaning it wasn't because of Isser. Rather, it was because of Rachmanis. David HaMelech said that it's not appropriate that the Jewish people should be mixed in with these Nesinim, because they're really from the Sheba Umas and they're fakers, whatever. So therefore, he didn't say those who are apostles should be forbidden. Those who are apostle Bakal, he has no problem. It's only because he didn't want them to be mixed into the Jewish people. But the Mamzer and the P'tzur Daka, and he was not marrying to the Kal. So therefore, that's why they're allowed to marry. But again, that wouldn't answer anything regarding our Shaila of a Kohen that's a P'tzur Daka. Now, however, Rabbi subsequently went back on this, and he says, Lam Melsi, it's not true what I said. I was explaining the pasuk of Leitis Chatin, that it was talking about that when they're not Jewish. And he says, no, it's not true. Because when they're not Jewish, there's no marriage at all, as the Gemara said in Daf Yomi and Aleph. Rather, Nizgairu is lechasnas. It's only when they convert that marriage is even possible. So obviously, the pasuk is saying Leitis Chatin don't have marriage must be when they already converted, and therefore, it must be telling me that it's because of the sanctity that a Jewish person has that is forbidden in these Nesinim, in the Goyim who converted. Now, for the fact that we're permitting a B'tzur Daka Yisrael in the Nesina, obviously the B'tzur Daka does not have a sanctity anymore, and that's why B'tzur Daka Yisrael is permitted in the Nesina. And same thing would be, therefore, this answers the question that a B'tzur Daka Kohen would be permitted to marry Giyaris, even though she's technically a Zaina, because a B'tzur Daka loses his Kedusha. Now, Masav Yisrael, Rabbi Yisrael asks, from the following pasuk in Melachim Aleph, it says, "Vayischatin Shloime es." Girsa takes out the word bas. Pari Melech Mitzrayim. He married the daughter of Pari, king of Egypt. Now wait a second. It says Vayischatin. She was not Jewish. I thought you told me there's no eschatnus to say any prohibition. How could you even do a marriage if there is no marriage at all by a non-Jew? Says Yuri Gaira. He converted her, and then he married her. Says but there was no accepting of converts. How could it be that Shlomo converted Bas Pari? Says no, me do a time. But what was the reason why they didn't accept Gerim in the days of Shlomo? Was only because reasons why people were converting was because of El Shulchan Malachim, was because they wanted the nobility, the royalty. In the days of David and Shlomo, they ruled the world, and people were converting because they just wanted to be from the higher echelons in the world. But it's the Tintam at Bays, but here by Bas Pari, the daughter of the king, she didn't need. She was the king of the daughter of the king anyway, so therefore Shlomo was able to convert her. Then the Gemara says, but even so, it should be sufficient that even if he converted her, how could he have married her? The mitzvah Rishainihi. She's a first generation Egyptian convert. And we know the Torah says you cannot marry such a woman. And even so, we're calling it Vayschatnu. So if that's the case, so it's possible to say the same thing by like Tischatin also, that maybe it's talking about before conversion, without Kedushin. How do you have your proof to say, to answer our question of B'tzur Daka Kohen from the B'tzur Daka Yisrael, that we see like the Schattenbaum is actually after they became Gerim, and therefore you see that still B'tzur Daka is permitted, obviously because he loses his Kedusha. How do you know maybe like the Schatten is before the Gerish, when they're not Jewish? Because you see by Shlomo it's called by Schatten, even though she already was, even when there was Aser, when she's not permitted him. And if you're going to say, it's a little bit of a cheshbon, we're getting off and off, but the Gemara says, never going to say, Azla Alma, maybe you're going to say that no, the Egyptians, the original Egyptians, they died. They were drowned in the days of Pari. And when the Torah was warning you, was from the Erev Rav, and V'hane Achrinenu. And other nations came and settled in their land. And the original Egyptians are not the same. Taisa discussed regarding Sancheiriv, and we know that, and we're going to see that in a moment regarding that. But maybe there are other ones that that took place, and therefore there wasn't a problem for Shlomo to marry her because she wasn't really a genuine Egyptian. But by the time in the Bryce, it can't be like that, because I remember Yehuda said Binyamin, it was generations later, Ger Mitzvah was an Egyptian convert, Hoyli Chaber. So Yehuda, he was my friend, and Tamid Rabbi Kiva, the students of Rabbi Kiva. And this Binyamin said, Ani Mitzvah Rishon, I'm a first generation Egyptian convert. But Nasati Mitzvah Rishon, I married a first generation female Egyptian convert. Also, Lebani Mitzvah Shni, I'm going to marry my son off to a second generation Egyptian female convert, that my grandson will be able to marry into the Jewish people. Because if I'm going to marry him off to a first generation Egyptian girl, then her son is going to be a second generation. Because as the Gemara says later on, we always go after the psul. We always go after the more inferior of the two. So I'll marry my son off, who's a second generation, to a second generation, that their child will be a third generation, be permitted to marry the killer. But one thing is, we see that obviously, we don't say the Egyptians are non-existent anymore. Obviously, this Minyamin held himself as Egyptian. So we're back to the question, how did Shlomo say Vayschatnu if you tell him Vayschatnu is only when they convert, but even if she converted, but she's still usher because of a first generation Egyptian. So how could you say Vayschatnu over there? How could you have married her? Amar Papa says, Anan Mishlema Leka B'Neisib. We're going to start asking questions from Shlomo Melech. Shlomo Le'Nasa Midi. Shlomo didn't even marry her. His intention was for Znus. Because the Chsibbi, the Pasuk says, Malachim Aleph, Min HaGoyim Asher Amar Hashem Al B'nei Yisrael. From the nations that Hashem said to the Jewish people, they should not come to them. They shouldn't come to you. because maybe they're going to tilt their hearts after their deities. To them, Shlomo cleaved for love, which is Rashi says, and not for Isha, not for marriage. So he didn't even marry. So what are you asking about? I think Mr. Al-Kasha says according to the positive it says that it was marriage. It says the Gemara no mitecha havi yiser sha'ava, because the great love that he loved for her, mal love because of kilin chatma. It's like as if he married her, but really there was no marriage. And you can't ask all these questions from Shlomo Melech regarding how to translate Beischatin. Is it before they convert, after they convert? No shaykhs, he didn't get married to her. Now, going back to this discussion regarding a Petzua Daka to one of the Nesinim, which we said it's permitted for Yisrael Petzua Daka to marry one of the Nesinim, only Rabbeinu Ravashi says, this way it relates back to Halacha Mishnah. But us, we didn't learn like this. Like this Bryce that we quoted before that said Petzua Daka is permitted in Nesina, but Tanan, in our Mishnah we learned Petzua Daka, B'krei Shavcha, crushed testicles and a severed member, with Tarim B'giris Mishacheres. What did we say in our Mishnah? We said permitted to marry Giris and Mishacheres because they're not from the Kahal Hashem. Now, a Yisrael that's kosher is also permitted in the Giris Mishacheres. Now it sounds like Haba Nesina, but a Kreis Shavcha and the Petzua Daka in the Nesina would be Asiri, like a regular Jew, because he retains his Kedusha. Because you're only saying it's B'giris and Mishacheres. So that contradicts the Brisa. Amalei, so Ravashi said back to Ravina, according to your reasoning, look at the next words of the Mishnah. Mishnah said, so Dak is only forbidden to marry into the Kila. Haba Nesina, sounds like Nesina is not from the Kila. The Shor is permitted. Obviously, you cannot infer anything from the inferences of our Mishnah. And there is not difficult to the Brisa that says it's permitted for a Petzua Daka Yisrael to marry one of the Nesina. Now I continue to the next Mishnah that continues on what we call Isuri Kihal, those who are forbidden to marry into the Kila, like a Petzua Daka. And we mention other individuals that also have Isurim of marrying into the Kila. Amayni Ma'avi, a man that comes from the people of Ammon and Moav, Asurin, they're forbidden to marry into the Jewish people. All their future generations, all their descendants are always forbidden, even if they convert to Judaism, are forbidden to marry into the Jewish people. But their females, when they convert, are permitted right away. Mitzvah Doimi, an Egyptian and an Edomite, even assume they're not forbidden. Their prohibition only lasts for 3 generations, and that's Echad Zachar Mechad Nekevis. That's both for the males and for the females. Rabbi Shimon, however, his matis Nekevis Miyad. He permits the females right when they convert. And Amr Shimon, he says, I'll tell you why. If a situation by the people of Ammon and Moab, where the males are forbidden forever, their females are permitted right away. Okay, so then Mokum Shlo Asa Esas Chavim Ilat Shalosh Adaris. So a place where the males are only forbidden only 3 generations by the mitzvah and Adoni, in addition Shanatis and the Givim isn't a Kavachim, and for sure the females should be permitted right away. Amalei, they said to him like this: Im halacha, if you heard this from your teachers that the females are permitted right away by mitzvah and Adoni, so the Kabbalah will accept your tradition. V'em ladin, but if you're coming from a Kavachim on your own, yes, tshuva, then there are responses to answer to your Kavul Chaim. The Gemara is going to explain what that is. Let me say similarly, no. He only, even if I would be saying the logic, the Kavul Chaim for myself, you would not have a response, like the Gemara is going to explain. But halacha l'yemer. Anyway, I'm saying a halacha, a tradition I had from my teachers, that mitzvah ademi, the females would be permitted right away. So the Gemara is not really going to the opening halacha of our Mishnah. Where do we know that only the male Amayavi are forbidden, but the females are permitted right away? So Rabbi Yechon says, because Amar Krelapah says in Shmuel Aleph, it says, V'cherei Shaul, an interesting story. V'cherei Shaul is David. When Shaul saw David HaMelech, Yotze the Kras HaPlishti, going towards the Philistine, we know the famous story with David, and Omel Avner Sar HaTzavah. He said to Avner, the general of the army, Ben Mizeh Hanar Avner. Avner, who is this boy, the son of? Avner said, he says, by the life of the king, if I know. He says, what? What? Shaul didn't know who David was? Like who killed this big Philistine that we know that they had this with the slingshot? Like it was a pasuk in Shmuel Aleph. It says, he loved him very much. But he actually was he was the bearers of his vessels. Shaul knew David. Ela avu kamashal. Rather, no, he was asking regarding his father. It says Ben Mizahana. Vayman's Ziza. I know who he is, but where's the Tata? says he can't be either because you think Shaul didn't know the father of David, but it says in there in the pasuk, it says Ish, and the man b'mei Shaul in the days of Shaul was Zaken Baba Nashim. He was an older person. He came with men. Some say Rababa. Who is that referring to? In the days of Shaul, say Yishai Abi David. What does it mean? He came ba'anashim. Shenichnas b'uchlasa v'yatsa b'uchlasa. That he would come and go, meaning he was a leader over 600,000 people. So obviously he was well known. He was renowned. So obviously Shaul knew his father too. So rather says this is what the story was saying. The Ger says actually Zil Shaul. Shaul was telling Avner, go ask. Imi Peretz, also we know that Yehuda had Peretz and Zarach. He had these two boys. Find out, we know David was from Shevet Yehuda. Find out Imi Peretz also was from Peretz, Imi Zarach also from Zarach. Why do you want to know that? Imi Peretz also, we know that the name signifies. So Imi Peretz also is from Peretz, the Malkahaba, meaning he's going to become a king. Shamelach, because the king is Peretz. The word Peretz is he breaches the walls of others. Las is derech to make a path, a shortcut from his house to his orchard or to his vineyard. No one could protest. Maybe it's from Zerach, that's from like shining, that's Chashiv Ba'al Hava. That just means he's going to have some type of a significance. Because, as the Gemara is going to explain, Shaul saw signs of royalty by David. So it's not possible he's not going to become some type of a leader. He just wanted to know if he's from Paris, he's going to be the king. And Zerach, he's going to have some type of significance. Now, says the Gemara, my time of Amalei Shaul, why did he say, go ask regarding him? In other words, what did he see that he was afraid from him that he's going to become the king? Remember, Shaul is the king, and he sees David, displaying signs of monarchy. Because it says in the pasuk, "Vayilba Shaul is David Madav." Shaul clothed David with his armor. What does it mean, Madav? It means kimidasa. It was like the measurements of David. It fit David like a glove. Now, it says regarding Shaul that he was Meshichma Malag Mikol Am, head and shoulders above everyone else. So that obviously was a miracle that it was fit David exactly, and it was a sign that he's going to be the king. Now, Amalei Daig says Shaul was obviously afraid that David was becoming king. So Amalei Daig said Daig, which in this sense was a Russia, he said to Shaul, before you ask to see if he's appropriate to be the king or not, first find out if he's even fit to marry a Jewish woman. My time, but what do you mean? What's the reason? Because the Kasim Samavi, we're going to learn this soon by Shavuos time, David HaMelech's special day, and he comes from Rus, the Moabite, from Mayev. Somebody Avner says to Daig, he says, what do you mean? Tanina, we learned Amoni V'lei Amonis. What's the problem? It's only about money people, but not the females. Mayev V'lei Moabis. Yeah, but Daig said, look, he was a lamdan. He said, if that's the case, when it says in term mamzer, you think a female is not a problem? It just says in the masculine. All Torah is written in the masculine. Mamzer is the same way. So Avner responded, he says, no, the word mamzer, ksiv, that means mumzar. The word mamzer is a compound word, mumzar. Whoever has a blemish of being foreign, because the union of the parents was not connected because they were prohibited one to the other, that means male and female. It's not mamzer versus mamzeres. So therefore that includes females too. But then he says, what do you do? The Daig response is, what's with mitzri? But like mitzvahs? What do you mean? By mitzri, it also says in masculine, it means the females too. So on that, Avner responds, he says, no, shani hacha, but here by Amnon Moav is different. Why? Because the Mefarish time, the pasuk in Devarim tells you why Amnon Moav were dealt so severely that they're forbidden forever to marry into the Kila, even if they converted for who knows how many generations. Because the pasuk says, Allah shalai kidma eschem alechem ma'im, because they didn't come beforehand when you were on the road to give you bread and water. Now, the norm is for a man to come out and to deliver the bread and the water. It's not the way of women to do that. And therefore, the women were not punished. And that's why women are allowed to, when they convert to marrying to the Kila. Which Daig responded, this is not true. You're right, the men should have gone to the men, and the women should have gone to the women. The right side of the street is for the men, the left side of the street is for the women, and the women should have gone. So Ishtik. So Avner was silent. Miyad, right away, it says in the pasuk, the king said to Avner, Sholata ben mizeh ha'olam. Go find out who is this young man. What does that mean? It says the Gemara Hasim over there, beforehand, Karle Nar. First he called him a Nar, a youth, and Karli Olam, nice calling him Olam, which also means a youth. What does change the wording? So Hachikamali, this is what Shaul told to Avner. Halacha nis'alma mimcha. The word Olam also means from the word of hidden. The halacha is eluded from you. You didn't have a good answer to Daig. Say B'Shal Beis HaMedrash, go ask it in the Beis HaMedrash. So Shaul, he asked in Beis HaMedrash. Only said to him, you're right. No, David is okay. It says, he's from Rus HaMoyaviyah. He's allowed to marry. As we continue to talk about and Aleph, so actually, Daig Kalam Nikushiyasa, but Daig asked all these questions, and then Ishtaku. They didn't have an answer either. What do you do with the fact of the women should have gone to the women? So Miyad, so Boilach Ruzila. So they wanted to make an announcement regarding David that he's taka apostle to marry into the Kila of the Jewish people. But Miyad, right away, the pasuk says within Shmuel Beis, Vamasa, Ben Ish, the son of a man, Ushmai, and his name was Yisra Yisraeli, Asher Bo El Abigal, who came to Abigal, Bas Nachash, the daughter of the snake, which actually, Tais says importantly, it's actually referring to the one who died from the bite of the snake, which actually refers to Yishai. It's actually, he was a family member. He was actually married into the family of David. It's important to keep in mind. Now, however, interestingly, Uksiv, the pasuk says in Divrei Yom Aleph, it actually calls him that Abigail gave birth to Amasa, and the father of Amasa was Yisra HaYishmaeli. So whether he Yisraeli or Yishmaeli, what was his name? So the Yom Rabbah, he was Yisraeli, but Malamash Chog Ki Yishmael, it comes to teach that he girdled his sword like an Arab. He said, whoever does not listen to this halacha, Yidaka will get stabbed with a sword. This is my tradition that I received from the Bezdin of Shmuel from Ramot, that's Shmuel Hanavi. And therefore, David is okay. Says Imam, was Yeser believed? But he says, any time of the scholar that he's coming to illustrate and teach a teaching, and he's coming, it depends. If before the story happens, he comes and he has this ruling, and Amra, he said, and he taught it to his students in the Beis HaMedrash in the name of his teacher, then you listen to him at the time of the rule. But if let's say he didn't come before, and it's only after the story comes, then he says, oh, I heard a tradition, ain't Shemaleh, we don't listen to him, because of the story is why he's saying it. And that's what Tais explains, it's only when you're in the Gay B'Davar. And here is his family politics, because he was married into the family. So how can we believe him now, La'acha Maisa? So the Gemara, Nashani Hoch, here it's different, called Shmuel Beis Din Nekayim. Shmuel with his court was still alive. And this is like what Rashi says, Mus David Legluya. This is something that's going to be revealed, because Shmuel could be asked. And therefore he's not going to lie, and therefore he was believed. But it says, well, we still have Daig's question. Why didn't the women go to the women? Women should have also been canceled culture forever, just like the men. Says the Gemara, Hachategima, here they translated in Bavel from a pasuk in Tilim. Called Kvuda Bas Melech Panima. All the dignity of the princess is by being inside. No, women don't go out to women, and therefore the women were not punished. But Marava, in the West, they said, some say Rabbi Yitzchak, Amakra, the pasuk says, Yemi loved the Malachim, said to Avram Avinu, Ayesar Eshtecha, where's sorry your wife for Goyim, etc. Which, what Avram answer, Hine Ba'oyel. It's not the appropriate way for a woman to go out of the house, and therefore the women were not punished, and that's where David HaMelech comes from a Moabite woman, which all comes from because of the princesses, the Jewish women, who they weren't punished, meaning the non-Jewish women, because they're not supposed to go out from where they are, and they weren't punished. Thank you to any time for hosting us.